Welcome to PMR, Paleo Magazine Radio, where we bring you paleo nutrition, exercise, and lifestyle perspectives from both the experts and the everyday. PMR is brought to you by Paleo Magazine, the first and only print magazine dedicated to the paleo lifestyle, and is hosted by Tony Federico.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Paleo Magazine Radio. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, trust your intuition. And typically this advice means that we should listen to that little feeling in our gut that mysteriously chimes in when something is right or when something is wrong. But what if your gut wasn't the only source of intuition? What if your workout itself could tap a hidden font of awareness? In today's show, fitness expert Jen Sinkler talks to us about a technique called intuitive training that can actually help you unlock hidden performance or even get out of pain. And then, in the second half of the show, I'm joined by Adam Farah for another installment of Big Picture Paleo. Adam and I discuss techniques for busting burnout, an all too common syndrome for those of us that like to push it to the limit. And sometimes we push it a little bit too far. But before we get started, I'm happy to say that we are once again sponsored by PrepDish.com. With PrepDish.com, you get weekly meal plans for efficiently preparing delicious healthy meals like smoky paprika chicken with roasted carrots, parsnips and fennel, and chipotle, bison, and kale chili. There's paleo as well as gluten-free options, and you can get one full month for only $4. That's right, only $4. That's only $1 a week by going to PrepDish.com/Paleo Magazine. Prepping food can be a little bit overwhelming, so I called up Prep Dish founder Allison Stevens-Schaff to get some of her food prep pro tips. And here's what she had to say.
You kind of hear these things when you watch cooking shows, but they're so true after years of cooking. Like, make sure you have a little trash can right in front of you or a little bowl with a baggie in it so you're not having to run back and forth to the trash can. The plans are set up so that they're efficient. You know, like you start with a thing that takes the longest to cook, and if the oven's set for one temperature for one dish, the other, everything for the day will be the same temperature for the oven. I don't know, having good quality storage too. Like, I like to have glass containers to put the food in. I feel like plastic containers just, one, it's not safe, and two, the food's just not appetizing when it comes out of plastic, I think.
PrepDish.com, giving you the tools you need to make good food even better. Remember to go to PrepDish.com/Paleo Magazine for $10 off your first month. My intuition's telling me you're going to like this episode. Paleo Magazine Radio starts now. I'm here with Jen Sinkler. Jen is somebody that I had the pleasure of meeting at Paleo FX this year in Austin, Texas. She's known for being the editor of Experience Life magazine, and now you're doing your own thing, and known for your take on cardio, which is to lift weights faster. Yeah, exactly. So we had a chance to talk. You're a fitness person. Fitness is my background, so I just love having the opportunity to really just dive deep into these subjects with people, especially somebody who's coaching people, still doing the face-to-face, in the trenches work of trying to make their clients better, which is certainly a challenge when you're trying to change bodies. It's no easy feat. So I'd just like for you to start with a little of your personal backstory. We already established you worked as the fitness editor for Experience Life, but before that, and kind of where did you come from, and how did you get into the fitness business in the first place?
I sort of reverse engineered the whole thing. I tried to become an editor. Originally, I was going to become an editor of fiction, and I went to school for that at Northern Iowa and played rugby there. And then I was looking for a rugby club to play for after school. Started out in Des Moines editing junk mail, which it was actually a lot more fun than it sounds.
Like literal junk mail, or was it
Yeah.
Okay. I thought maybe it was a magazine called Junk Mail. I was like, that's clever.
No, actual junk mail that nobody reads.
Oh, nice.
I spent my first 2.5, 3 years of editing junk mail.
So the stuff that gets sent to people.
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean direct mail, direct
So
marketing.
you're the one that's responsible for all that.
No, I'm just responsible for that having no typos.
Okay, well that's good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I ended up in Des Moines after college
Right.
for a few years. But Des Moines is not a rugby mecca, unfortunately, not
Really?
for women's rugby. Yeah, I know. You'd think.
I don't understand why.
I was playing for the junior national team at that time, trying to make the senior national team, and I thought I was moving to Des Moines to like build this rugby program up. Didn't entirely take, so I was like, I got to get to a bigger city with a better
Yeah.
rugby team, and that was Minneapolis. So I interviewed for this position as an associate editor with Experience Life magazine, and within 2 years, I was the fitness editor, senior fitness editor, editorial director of fitness, and I just left there it was January 1st, 2013. So I've been on my own since then. Started my own website, jensinkler.com. I'm about to rebrand. I haven't actually said this publicly yet.
Oh, it's a first. We got an exclusive. All right.
I ran away from home. That's Philadelphia right now. I usually live in Minneapolis. But I came here for 5 weeks to write a bunch of new content for the website. So my clients are in good hands at Movement Minneapolis, which is the gym that I run with my husband now in Minneapolis.
Dave?
But, yes, David Delanave. We're in and out of the gym all the time. And I don't know if you've ever read the article about a maker's versus manager's schedule.
I was just listening to the Tim Ferriss
Oh,
podcast, and they were talking about kind of splitting your day up between those two phases.
Yep, exactly. And so a maker's schedule it's the creative process,
Right.
requires sort of large blocks of uninterrupted time. And those are hard to come by. Those are
Totally.
really hard to come by. So I try to create days at home. I try to have like Tuesdays, Thursdays be my writing day. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm training clients in the gym and sort of in and out and working on website stuff and with my team. I needed, I guess, a little larger chunk. So I ran away from home for a little while to rebrand as unapologeticallystrong.com.
Oh, nice.
I love being an editor, and I want my site to feel more collaborative and inclusive,
Sure.
and to provide a platform for really amazing coaches to write programs. And I think my greatest strength is probably my network and my editorial skills.
Yep.
So I want to put those to use a little harder. So, and to create more programs for both men and women, but primarily for women. Like there are a few companies out there who do men's programs really, really well, or they're sort of geared recovery wise to men. And intensity-wise to larger powerlifting men.
Sure.
And so I think we need more stuff for women.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that you're a great person to do it. You certainly walk the walk. I'm a little interested in the transition from being an editor to being a co-owner of a gym and really kind of getting deep into that, because you were playing rugby. You started working as an editor. At what point, I mean, I'm sure you were working out all along, but at what point did you start to train other people, and when did you really become passionate about doing that?
Oh yeah, I totally lost the thread on that conversation.
Bringing it back.
Thank you. So I moved to Minneapolis, was an editor, and what was really intimidating as an editor, as a fitness editor, because I'd always been a jock and I'd been playing rugby and I made the national team, but I never had coached anybody else. This is in the early 2000s. And here I was trying to describe how to do exercises or like really dig into fitness philosophy in these articles. And I was responsible for coming up with the ideas, the concepts of the pitches, for assigning out to freelance writers and for editing them at every single stage, which ends up, as you know, being a whole bunch of stages. So you see that article 1,000 times before it's ready. And I wanted to feel more like an authority on the topics, because writing exercise descriptions, like teaching somebody how to do something, is very, very different from knowing how to do it.
Right.
And that's a completely different skill set. So I started going to more and more conferences, started out, at Perform Better.
Yeah. Great site. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And they do those 3-day functional fitness summits that I really like. And I met a lot of really great resources like Coach Dose and Alan Cosgrove and Rachel Cosgrove. Will Fleming is another one at those conferences. So I started, hanging out with them socially and like picking their brains a lot more about their approach to fitness. And it was really enlightening. So the stories got better and better for Experience Life. And I started training people so that I could then write about how to do things a lot better in the magazine.
So you really did kind of reverse engineer the whole process, because for somebody who hasn't done it, and I've done it, so I've struggled with this. I know what you're talking about. I actually got my start in writing, working for a local publication in Gainesville, Florida. This is when I was in college. I was doing a fitness column.
Yeah.
And so every month I had to put out a workout. And I, for the first time, realized how difficult it is to describe even a basic exercise, because if you, so what do you say? Do you flex at the hip, extend the knee? You know what I mean? Like, you don't use kinesiological terms. You have to use layman's terms. it's really a challenge. I don't know if people know how hard it is to write clear exercise descriptions. I'm always like throwing some pictures.
That helps too. Yeah, no, it's funny. I can always tell people who have done fitness rating before because their exercise descriptions give it all away.
Yeah.
And when somebody's brand new to fitness rating, it's just a mess. Like, if you can write bulleted, step-by-step directions, I also think that too can help you be a better coach, is if you practice writing them out. And I think that really great coaches, and I always see this, they tell stories about how the exercise should look and feel, or like they give you a task. They give you a task to complete, like, pretend that you're trying to place your butt on the floor between your Achilles tendons instead of like, flex the hip, blah, 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 blah.
Right. It's almost more narrative and like you said, story than like a technical description of what's happening.
Well, I really like that sort of external cueing rather than the internal cueing. Like, if you get somebody focusing on a task to complete, then the form sort of falls into place. Whereas if you're trying to cue them to engage certain muscles at certain times, I mean, the body's pretty smart. Like, if you're trying to explain how to do a movement and you think you're going to hit every single muscle, you're going to describe every single thing that they are supposed to do, you're in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, because we got, like 600 something muscles, and if you're describing single joint and muscle actions, people don't move that way. Right. We pick things up, we push things, we pull things, and so it just doesn't make sense to us to try and do it in a mechanized. We're not robots, I guess is the point.
Exactly, and I really think that stories are sticky, and I think that that's a lesson I learned from writing and editing. Like, people want to hear stories, they want to connect with that, and they want to make their exercise fun. And so, pretending you have a cute little clutch purse underneath your arm when you're doing a kettlebell clean is more fun than like lock your shoulder back into place and blah 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 blah.
Blah. Retract your scapula. That's the old standby.
Yeah. Exactly. But you have a clutch purse under your arm. You don't want to drop it in a puddle. That's more entertaining.
Right, absolutely. So you figured out kind of the exercise piece as a result of being an editor, of having to learn and be an authority about these exercises. When did Dave come into the picture? Was he already running a gym? How did that all happen?
He was. I met him in 2011, and he'd already had Movement Minneapolis open, I think since 2009, I want to say, at its old location. I had lived in Philly for 3 years, now 5 years ago, and I had just moved back about a year prior when a guy this is a convoluted story, but a guy that I knew from Philly had Facebook messaged me saying, "Hey, I'm coming to Minneapolis. You should come watch this grip competition."
What competition?
A grip competition.
Okay, literally a grip competition.
Yes, like where they, they bend nails and they tear phone books in half, and then they pick up, large objects or smaller objects, I guess, but like with their hands alone. It sounds like it would be really badass. It's actually a tiny bit anticlimactic. I hate to say that. Sorry if anybody's a grip competitor out there.
We just lost our whole grip competitor audience.
They're just like, they tend to be like, like small, like knobs, and like you're trying to like pick it up like that. Yeah. Like, do you have the grip strength to do that? But I was curious, and I was looking, maybe that's a story idea. Like, that's why I end up at most of the events I go to. It's like, this could be a story idea. And so I headed out there, and it turns out it was Dave's gym.
Oh, nice.
So we hit it off immediately, and he taught me about this intuitive training philosophy that we institute at the gym. I found out there's one other gym in the world, and it's in Prague, I believe, that institutes the gym movement protocol. And that's what we use with all of our clients. And it's a way of tapping into what your body wants to do on any given day. It changed everything for me. It changed absolutely everything. Because when I met Dave, I'd been CrossFitting and coaching CrossFit. I think that CrossFit has done so many good things for strength training, especially strength training for women, and for popularizing that.
Kind of made it cool for girls to lift weights again.
Yeah, and for women to be strong and embrace their potential. And I, as a movement, really like CrossFit. If I have one criticism of CrossFit, it's that it tends to involve too many sagittal plane movements. At most of the boxes or locations, like there's quite a lot of the back and forth, the forward and backward sagittal plane movement, and not a lot of frontal plane movement, not a lot of transverse or rotational movements, and that can lead to some creaky like low back joints, some shoulder stuff. And so when I met Dave, I was a little bit incapacitated, or not quite that, I guess, that dramatic.
Maybe on the road to possibly getting some injuries, just kind of feeling some kind of achy, this and that.
Oh, it was worse than that. I couldn't deadlift anymore.
Okay. So you're already down that path.
I mean, I could do any movement, but sometimes always the hinging movements, especially heavy deadlifts, would make my lower back scream, and I'd be out or I would not be able to do much for a week or two afterwards, and that's not a nice place to be.
No.
And so I met him, and he was telling me about this intuitive training philosophy, and he said, come in and I'll teach you more about it. So I did.
Do you think he had ulterior motives at that point?
He never charged me for a gym membership, and
that's a giveaway.
He's like, well, just in case, because he didn't date gym members. So
okay.
He's like, just in case. So we were just friends for 6 months. The guy who invited me to the grip competition had said to him, I've got dibs on the editor, but I guess he didn't.
No, he did not have dibs.
Anyway, so I went into the gym. He taught me this intuitive training protocol, and I said, okay, the only thing I can't do today is deadlift. I can't deadlift. And Dave is very confident. I'll say that about him. And so
he's like, hold up.
I know. He was like, he kind of scoffed at me. He's like, we'll see about that.
Okay.
And he was right. And so I used the testing protocol to figure out which deadlift version was right for me on that day. And it changes from day to day with every single person. Sometimes like you'll go through a period of time where one particular version of a deadlift or of a press or of a squat or of a pull will test best for you. And then suddenly one day a different one will, because your abilities expand as you follow what your body's path. And I know that sounds like kind of woo-woo, but it is. It's woo-woo and it's magic.
Well, I think everybody can relate to having a bad day with something.
Yeah.
And what this is making me think is on those days where, for example, you're kind of heading down that path where I'm having a bad day with this lift, instead of pushing through that,
exactly,
you switch things up and you change gears and kind of take it in a different direction. The reason I hurt my lower back deadlifting is I had a day where my back was kind of talking to me and giving me some warning signs. I pushed through it and was out for a week, and I've had lingering issues ever since then. So I'm really digging what you're saying. Now, if you can maybe talk us through, for somebody who isn't aware of variations on a deadlift, they might be thinking, well, what other ways can you deadlift? Maybe they've seen a sumo deadlift versus a traditional deadlift. Outside of that, what are some other options?
Well, a gym favorite for us is called the Jefferson Deadlift or the Jefferson Lift. This is the one that tested best for me for probably a good month before then sumo started testing well too. And then eventually conventional would test well again. Now I can do just about any kind of deadlift. And I'm actually back to deadlifting, at least in powerlifting competitions, conventionally, which I learned in the middle of a powerlifting competition in December because I had been pulling sumo, and it kind of felt like crap during the warm-up. And Dave was like, why don't you test conventional? And I was like, oh, right. I guess I could test right in the middle of the competition. I did, and conventional tested better, and I ended up pulling a PR that day.
Nice.
So I trust the test so much. But the Jefferson deadlift is kind of a combination of a squat and a deadlift. You straddle the bar. It looks super funky.
So the bar is kind of between your legs.
Between your legs. Yep. It's called a straddle deadlift. It looks like you're riding a pony or a witch stick, broomstick.
Right.
You squat down to the bar and adjust your feet so that you can really drive through both heels. Grasp the bar. Usually you use a mixed grip with front hand open and back hand closed. So your torso is much more upright than a conventional deadlift. So it's more of a squat posture. Like you're pretty close to upright. And then you stand up with it between your legs. Arms stay straight. Obviously, everybody kind of worries about what's going to happen when they stand up with it. Yeah. But most people's long arms are plenty long enough.
Okay.
I've heard, so there's one person who says that his arms aren't long enough, like aren't physically long enough, but you can usually adjust how much space you have by narrowing your hands just a little bit.
Sure.
But that's a go-to one for us, for people with low back pain. So we have a physical therapist who works out of Movement Minneapolis named Erica Mundinger, and she is a huge fan of rotational movements for soothing creaky SI joints. Because we overuse certain muscles when we're doing a lot of sagittal plane movements. So this involves...
Yeah, and I just want to kind of bring it back for a second for people who might not be so versed in kinesiological terms. I live in that world, but I don't often get a chance to talk to guests on the show about it. So, we're talking about sagittal plane, frontal plane, transverse plane. Really what we're talking about is utilizing all three dimensions. So front to back movements, side to side movements where you have to turn and rotate. An example I like to give people, because some of the audience might just be listening to this, is a standard rotational movement, swinging a baseball bat. Anytime you're turning your hips, a lot of throwing movements. Even throwing a punch, you're going to be turning your hips. A jumping jack might be a nice stereotypical frontal plane movement, the movement of the legs moving out and in, arms going up and down to the sides. And then sagittal plane, like you mentioned, that's a lot of our kind of traditional exercises. Squat, where your hips are moving back, knees are moving slightly forward, body's moving slightly forward. A leg extension, that would be a pure sagittal plane type of movement. So we're just talking about kind of exploring all three dimensions of movement.
Yeah, and if you want to give one example, a sagittal plane lunge would be a forward and backward lunge.
Right.
A lateral lunge would be that frontal plane lunge, so out to the side
Yep.
and back up. And then a rotational lunge, you would step back or forward and rotate toward your front leg,
Yep.
holding a weight. And so I really like those with sandbags. That's one of my go-to rotational movements, and is another. So our physical therapist loves the rotational movements for low back or SI joint pain because it involves a lot of the musculature that gets completely ignored in a lot of the sagittal plane movements.
Yeah, I see a lot of people who aren't able to access their hips very well. And
Yeah.
I think when you start introducing those rotational movements, that's a good kind of diagnostic tool to see, can somebody actually internally rotate their hip? Can they actually get their pelvis relative to their femur kind of moving towards each other versus staying in these stuck positions? And of course, that's going to impact your lower back. Of course, that's going to impact kind of upstream and downstream, whether you have a low back issue or a knee issue or what have you.
Yep, because that kind of stuff does send the pain up or down. It's going to hurt the neighbors.
Absolutely. An example I like to use is if you have an office, the guy that's taking on extra tasks, he's the one that has the nervous breakdown. It's not the guy who's slacking off.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Everyone's been in like a group project, and if you're that person that always takes on all the work, you're the one that's freaking out. It's not the people that are not pulling their weight.
That's a hilarious way to put that. I love geeking out with you. This is super fun to geek out with you.
Yeah, I never get to really talk about the exercise stuff, so I'm loving it. So you guys, you're working in your gym, Movement Minneapolis. You're utilizing the intuitive training protocol. How do you kind of work people into this? How do you kind of introduce them to it and kind of get them on board? Because you mentioned it might be a little woo-woo. It sounds pretty reasonable to me, but I'm sure there's an education process there.
Day one, we teach them the protocol, and as far as like logistically, because I realize we may want to back up a step, like what does testing even mean?
Sure, yeah.
And so you're going to come into the gym, and what we teach clients in their intro class is you're going to come in and you're going to test your baseline range of motion. And so we like toe touch test best for most people. You can also do like a side arm raise. You could do a straight leg line on your back raise.
Yep.
You could do a finger raise, for God's sake. It doesn't matter. Like, the test is global. You don't have to do an upper body joint test for an upper body lift to test upper body lifts. The tests are completely global. And what we've found is that they align really closely with something that is becoming more and more accepted in the fitness industry, which is heart rate variability testing, or HRV. What HRV does is tell you whether any particular day is a good training day or a not good training day, like whether you might want to take a rest day. Like if you have high heart rate variability, it's a really good training day for you and you're primed to go. Your body's like ready to rock. Now, if you've got low heart rate variability on a particular day, then you might need a little rest, a little R&R, and then live to train again another day. And that's a fantastic tool. Why we use range of motion testing, though, is that it gives you specific answers about specific lifts. Rather than, waking up and saying green light day or red light day, you can find out if it's a green light lift or a red light lift. Somebody will come in, test baseline, and you can note from day to day whether your baseline range of motion is better or worse.
If you're doing a test of a lift, this is unloaded, loaded, are you using any weight?
We start out just by doing the movement. You can test the tool, you can test the movement, but this is a huge rabbit hole you can go down. Because as many questions as you can ask yourself, that's how many things that you can test.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like it's time intensive, but it's really not. Like, I made an Instagram video that lasted 13 seconds that I tested 2 different kinds of lifts. I mean, like, that's how quickly I decided between 2 kinds of front squats. Because everybody's always like, I don't have time for this. I'm like, you have time for this. It's 13 seconds to decide between 2 different lifts. Anyway, test your baseline range of motion. It's not a stretch and reach test, so you're not trying to go to end range of motion. You're not trying to exert any sort of effort at all. In fact, it's not even a hamstrings flexibility test. You're stopping at the first sign of tension anywhere in your body. That could be the back of your neck. So you're keeping your feet all the way together, folding forward from the hips, and letting your hands slide down your legs, and then you're going to note the point at which you stop, where you would have to exert some sort of effort to go any further. And then you perform a couple unweighted exercises, like say you want to do a front squat that day. So you're going to load up your imaginary bar. You're going to do like 2 or 3 reps, stand back up, feet back together, and then retest. If your range of motion increased, that's your body saying, Mama likes that test.
Oh, okay.
Like, we want a front squat that day. If your range of motion either stays the same or gets shorter, then that's a no-go for a front squat on that day.
It's just triggering something in your nervous system, physiology. Something's just not jiving.
ANS, CNS.
Sure.
I mean, mental state. Like, I will say, though, that you can wish your way You can I don't want a front squat today. Anything but front squats, it might test amazing. You can't cheat the system. You're not going to be able to, you can hope, but it's probably not going to happen. Because your body knows what you need. So then you would move on to back squats, do a couple, picture the bar on your back, do a couple, literally 2 to 3 reps, stand back up, retest. How's that range of motion compared to front squats range of motion? Is it better or worse? If it beats out front squat, okay, that's the one in the lead. Then you might test goblet squats. So you're going to do exactly the same thing. Whichever one tested the best for you on that day, that's the one you're going to do.
Now, do you typically have an inclination? You mentioned you don't get to wish your way into an exercise. Do you at this point kind of have an inclination ahead of time where you're like, I kind of feel like this is going to be this kind of day? Or have you developed maybe a feel for that ahead of time? Or is it really just in that moment on the spot? You still got to do the test, even though you've been doing this for a while?
I still do the test. I usually know when something is going to test well. Once I do a couple reps of it, I'm like, oh yeah, that was good. And so I sort of predict the outcome before the actual range of motion test. And I'm pretty spot on that at that point, because all this is a way of tapping into your body's, how you're already feeling, tapping into your intuition. Wow, that felt great. And so many of us are disconnected from how our bodies actually feel.
Totally.
We're so used to pushing through, especially on the topic of exercise. We've sort of have this idea ingrained in us that exercise is supposed to be terrible and hard.
Go hard or go home.
I wrote a piece for Women's Health about the go hard or go home mentality. And
does that need to go home? Does that whole saying has to go home?
Yes, go home. On the other hand, it's this two-way street, communication. Your body's constantly saying yeah, that's good, or no, that's not so hot. And once we start listening to that, and only doing things that your body says, yep, I want that.
Yeah.
What we find is that we avoid a lot more injury and we make better progress and more consistent progress because we're constantly doing the things that our bodies want to do. And that's not to say that you never get to follow a program. I love following a program. I just started working with a guy named Alex Beata because as much as I don't like traditional cardio, he's really impressed me with his hybrid athlete approach. Nobody knows this yet either. I'm doing 30-minute runs once a week now. Who am I? I know, and I'm on the air dying a couple times a week, and I want to know about everything, and I want to know how everything feels, and I want to know what I'm missing and how to include more aspects of training in what I program for my clients. So I'm doing a little cardio now. Now, don't get me wrong, he still has me lifting like a power lifter, I'm going super heavy. I'm doing a lot of circuit workouts, a lot like lift weights faster or CrossFit-esque workouts, and I'm doing some traditional cardio for the first time in a really long time.
I like that just because I think a lot of times we get very compartmentalized. We get very in the box about things. So for example, somebody starts CrossFitting and they're like, that's it. I'm done running. I'm only going to, either I'm rowing or I'm cleaning and that's it. Or somebody's all in on the endurance track. I like this idea that you can really, why take a tool out of your toolbox? And that just seems to be what you're doing. You're saying, well, why should I have any holes in my physical development? Am I just going to take a philosophical stance against running just because? Or am I going to maybe learn how to run well? Am I going to incorporate that in a reasonable way and find that middle path? And we're really missing that middle path. And I think that that's where we need to spend more time is what's the right balance of elements versus completely eliminating things whole cloth, either all cardio or all weights or all CrossFit or all bodybuilding. Why not synthesize and take advantage of the benefits of all these different modes of exercise?
Tony, that's so beautifully put. If I had a podcast, I would invite you on.
Good thing we're recording this.
That was awesome. So I can follow a program, but I may adjust the program on the fly. I've been doing this now since 2011. I'm on my own path, but I'm also not afraid to adjust when my body says adjust, and that's okay. And we tend to see that if you're really strong and healthy, that you can, for the most part, do what you want to do. And it obviously depends on recovery, sleep, and nutrition, but you can follow your program pretty closely. Now those with some pre-existing injuries, you have to ask a lot more questions, and that's okay. It's worth the time that you invest. One of David's favorite questions is, can I do that? And that's how we encourage our clients to approach their training is ask that question. Can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this?
Kind of almost like a playful sort of attitude.
Oh yeah, I think that training should absolutely be play and should be enjoyable, and it that's the spirit, right? Is exploration. All of this is a grand experiment. Let's find out what we're capable of doing, and I think that that's a piece that we miss in the fitness industry, and we don't make it fun, and we don't make it this exploration. We're like, oh, we have to do this. No, man, you get to do this, and if you don't like what you're doing, do something else. There's so many ways to skin a cat. I hate that saying. I don't know.
we, I think, have this whole subset of the population that's not exercising. They're completely opted out.
Yep.
And certainly that's an issue. Being sedentary, we know that there's problems that creates. But then the people that do work out, they seem to take this totally extreme perspective. I think that we can bring more of that sedentary group, which is unfortunately most of the population. We can get more of them in the fold if we allow fitness to be, like you said, more fun, more inclusive, more playful.
Yeah.
Rather than being the sole realm of the elite, of the people that go hard and go home, the people that sweat blood or whatever other kind of extreme things that they're doing. Sweat, Gatorade, and blood, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah. Nobody drinks Gatorade, do they?
I don't know. I think people actually do. It's helpful being in the world and kind of still working with clients because you see this stuff. People are grabbing Gatorade and think that that's going to give them energy for some reason.
Well, I mean, it has its place, I suppose, but
not for most of the exercisers that I see. Well, Jen, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show. I wish we could chat for a whole hour, but unfortunately,
me too.
We're just going to have to bring you back on again in the future.
Okay, deal.
And if people want to find you, is your website still jensinkler.com, or are you going to be kicking it over?
I will be kicking it over, but probably not for another 3 to 4 months. This thing is just in the beginning process of getting shifted over.
And that's Unapologetically Strong is your new, just announced rebranding.
Woo! And I think it will forward over to jensinkler.com, so either one.
Great. Well, hey, thank you so much, and good luck with your intuitive training and your new endeavors.
Thanks for having me on.
That was Jen Sinkler. You can find out more about Jen and get her free Thrival guide, which includes absolute musts for getting strong, healthy, sexy, and fulfilled by going to her website, jensinkler.com. Now, before we talk big picture stuff with Adam Farah, I wanted to share another clip from my chat with Prep Dish founder Allison Stevens-Schaff. I often get stuck in food ruts myself. Right now it's kale salads with chicken, kale salads with beef, kale salads with pork. Obviously, I could use some inspiration, so I needed to know how Allison comes up with brand new, exciting, and appetizing recipes each and every week.
Working with clients in the past, they always challenged me to come up with new ideas, especially if there were restrictions or something. And so I had a lot of experience doing it in the past. And then now when I travel, definitely, like, especially spices and sauces, I always try and play around with that. I just got back from Africa, so I've been kind of trying to play around with some of that. In Namibia, there were some like Moroccan spice blends. So I've been trying to come up with some Moroccan spice blends to use. I've used them in a hash and then maybe on some sort of protein. I haven't decided yet. And then there are a lot of piri-piri sauces, so like a piri-piri chicken. And there are also a lot of curries over there. And I love curries. That's one, especially families. Sometimes they hesitate and they are not sure if their kids are going to like it. The curries are one that I kind of have to introduce pretty slowly. And but I love them so much, so I still push for them.
PrepDish.com. Traveling the world for foodspiration so you can eat well. Go to PrepDish.com/Paleo Magazine and you'll only spend $4 for an entire month of meal plans. That's a lot cheaper than a plane ticket to Africa. Okay, it's time for Big Picture Paleo with Adam Farah. I'm Tony Federico and you're listening to PMR. All right, everybody, welcome back to another installment of Big Picture Paleo with Adam Farah. Adam, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Tony, what's going on, man?
I'm good, man. I think this has just kind of been a busy time of year. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We were talking briefly before the recording about things stacking up and how that can cause some internal dynamics to shift and to potentially become overstressed. And I just wanted to chat it out with you, man, just see if we can discuss burnout and what that means for somebody who's kind of keeping a busy schedule.
Yeah, and just on the topic of burnout, the June-July 2015 Paleo Magazine actually has a full article from me on burnout. So, if what we talk about here makes sense, then that's one to go back and look through as well. From what I've understood and from the different things I've looked at and from sort of dealing with concepts and then going and living for a year or 2 or 5 or whatever and doing what I'm doing and then sort of getting stuck with the same things, maybe at a higher level, and then having to come back and say, well, revisiting old material or, material I looked at before and seeing like the new meaning that's in it now that I've gained experience. What I've pinpointed, and I've pinpointed it because Anthony Robbins pinpointed it first and, made a program about it. But if you are stressed, you are focusing on things that are urgent and important. So this is essentially, you're putting out fires. 50, 60, 70% of your time or more is putting out fires.
Right.
The way Robbins explains it, that is the definition of stress.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of putting you in that alarm state. You know, people are either complaining about something or something's broken. Bottom line, something demands your attention right now, requires you to kind of go into that fight or flight mode right now.
Yeah, so like if you have stress, and you can do this, you can say, okay, I'm really stressed, and you can go through and say, well, what's going on right now? Okay, well, I'm dealing with this. You know, it's like probably a large amount of stuff you don't even want to deal with that you have to deal with, or something bad is going to happen, or it's something you would love to do, but your time is so crunched that it's unpleasant to do because you don't have the time.
Right.
So how do we deal with that? Well, if that's stress, well, what is fulfillment? Well, fulfillment is when we focus on things that are important but not urgent. So, for example, if I'm running up to the wire on something for Paleo Magazine, something that's important but not urgent, like my workout, like a little more sleep, like yoga and meditation instead of just quick yoga, those things are going to slide. You know, we can argue, but like I'm putting off something that's, well, my health. Okay, so arguably that's more important than an article for Paleo Magazine. But because there's this time pressure, the important but not urgent thing is, well, I'll have to do that later because this thing is urgent and important.
Right.
And so we go from the dimension of fulfillment, as Tony Robbins calls it, to the dimension of demand, which is where the stress is. And so what he says is that you need to spend 40% or more of your time in fulfillment, in the things that are important but not urgent, because that's when you're happy. If you're happy and fulfilled in your work, then 40% or more of your time, and it's amazing he's got like these metrics, you know, but 40% or more of your time is doing things that are important but not urgent. And if you're stressed, then the majority of your time is in the important and urgent, you know, the putting out fires.
Right. You know, and I think that if putting out fires is the sympathetic fight or flight state, then the zone of fulfillment, the important but not urgent tasks, that's probably more related to the parasympathetic state. And you even mentioned some activities that really kind of give you that sensation, things like yoga and yoga plus meditation specifically. You know, I think that there's a very real biological response to these types of demands, or these types of activities. And if we can shift the scale more towards one than the other, we're really going to have a big impact on our overall sense of well-being and our sense of kind of where we're at in life. You know, I do think that it's worth mentioning, and I'm just going to be honest here, this is an aspiration of mine, that shifting that scale isn't necessarily a matter of, let's just say, quitting your job or completely changing your external world, that some of these things can be accomplished internally as well as through an improvement in your processes. So, for example, is there something that you could delegate out? Is there something that you could hire somebody to take care of? Are you doing something that's putting you in that fight or flight state, that's putting you face to face with these urgent and important tasks that you could pay somebody else to do and do just as well? You know, and I think that this kind of relates back to some of the stuff that we've talked about before, like the 4-hour work week stuff, and just getting the process approach. Because, you know, right now I'm personally in a situation, and it's not really the Paleo Magazine side of my work. It's my day job working as a supervisor of a fitness center where, you know, I came into the position relatively recently. I'm in charge of the entire operation, from the swimming pool to the childcare to the accounting and billing. And, you know, what I'm focused on right now is how do I train the staff to operate at their 100% so that I'm not picking up 10% for this person or 20% for this person. You know, how do I make some of our processes more efficient, whether it's a billing system or, you know, how we sell personal training or whatever the case may be? How do I get these things lined up so that I'm not constantly putting out fires day in and day out? But it's tricky, man. Those fires, you know, they take up time. You know, bottom line, there are times they take up time, and then you're exhausted, and then sometimes you don't feel like you have the energy to work on the stuff that's not urgent, but that could maybe get you out of the firefighting mode.
Yeah, last time we talked about having processes and having systems and habits and stuff, and it's like, everybody's saying, oh, well, if you're stressed and whatever, 4-hour work week and hire a VA and, outsource it and have somebody else do that stuff. And it's like, but if you don't have a system in place to teach somebody how to do the stuff you need them to do, you're just going to have more stress, because now you're going to have like you're going to have like an employee or somebody working for you. You're going to be paying them, and they're going to be more confused than you are because they don't know what you want them to do. So so it's almost like I guess a simplistic example with what you're talking about would be, okay, look, you're going to have to block out time to not be putting out fires so that you can create whatever operating procedure or whatever it is you need to do to get some critical piece of work off of your plate and give it to the person that you're going to give it to. Because it's easier to just keep putting out fires, and it's like, I really got to write that procedure. I really got to train that person.
Right.
The person's doing okay, but I haven't trained him yet, and I really got to, do better with that. And it's like a continual problem.
It starts to pile up.
Yeah, in a way, I've been lucky. I as much as I've had a problem with burnout now for a little while, as much as that's happened, I've just not really been able to take new things on. And so things have quieted down. And that's not necessarily how I want things, because things are a little bit quiet now for me in my business and my work and my writing and on my blog. But what it has done is it gave a little bit of space to say, okay, there's really not any fires right now. I mean, there's not any forward motion necessarily, but there's not a lot of fires either. And that little bit of silence has allowed me to just stop and say, okay, where are the time blocks and what should go there? Like, I got to have my most important task done by 11 a.m. And then you go, a week or something, and you're like, wow, I haven't done anything before 11 a.m. Like, what have I been doing? And you can really do that. You can say, what did I do today? I was busy all day, but I don't know really what I did. But when you have that space, you can stop and say, well, wait a minute, I really didn't have any demands. So if I didn't get done what I really think I needed to get done, then why did that happen? And you can get very detailed about, well, what did I actually do that prevented me from doing that? And why did that happen? What was I thinking? What happened? What process did I do? So like one of my things, which I have been pretty good at, is I've been training again in a Filipino art called Modern Arnis. My teacher has been, he's said it forever. If you swing the stick every day for 10 minutes or so, it will teach you everything you need to know. Just go out and swing your stick. So no pressure, no nothing. You know what? I got to swing that stick every day. So yesterday morning, I had a lot of stuff to do. I went outside. I didn't get into a whole big process of getting ready to work out and everything. Did some stretches, practiced with a light kettlebell, swung my stick, and you know what? It was a great investment of time. It wasn't urgent. I could have gone without doing that, but I learned some stuff, and I said, gee, that really was cool. I need to do this every day, because just swinging it once outside of class started to make me feel more comfortable doing the things I needed to do. So it's not that hard. But it's sort of like you have to say, well, okay, hey, I didn't do anything before 11 a.m. So what if at 9 a.m. I had gone and swung my stick for 15 minutes? What would that have damaged taking that few minutes? You're going to do that texting. You'll pick up your phone for 15 minutes.
The big kind of takeaway here is that even if you're in a state of burnout, you're putting out the fires, you're kind of struggling, by kind of forcing yourself to block off some time, forcing yourself to invest in some non-urgent activities, you increase that proportion of fulfillment in your life. And then that's something that now you can start to see the benefits, and you can start to see, like my energy levels aren't kind of fixed throughout the day. It's not that if I go out there and I give myself 10 minutes to relax and do something fun and non-essential, that, everything's going to come crumbling down. In fact, things can actually seem like they're working a lot better when you take that time to invest in yourself. So I think that's a good message for our listeners out there, because you know what? Bottom line, we're all going to be facing stress at some point. We're all going to get a little overwhelmed at some point. And having a couple tools on our toolbox certainly can help get us out of that situation, or allow us to see a way out of our situation. Thanks for coming on the show, Adam. It's always a pleasure talking to you, man. And I'm definitely going to take some time to swing my proverbial stick. It might take a slightly different form. I don't know, maybe going out and playing with the pull-up bar or something like that. But thanks again, man. Appreciate the chat.
You too.
All right, Paleo Nation, that's going to do it for today's episode. Coming up next time on the podcast, relentless Roger Dickerman. Roger is a personal trainer, a gym owner, and a podcaster, and we talk about the art and science of personal training. Here's a preview.
As a personal trainer, you just want so desperately to get results for people, and you want so desperately to have them believe that you're going to be the one to get them the results, that you have no perspective in those first couple of years. And you almost think, if I level with this person right now, they're going to leave. You know, they're going to go to another trainer. They're going to go somewhere else. And I think that fear factor looms.
Whether or not you're a personal trainer, there's a lot of takeaways in next week's show. It's going to be something that you're going to want to tune into. So be sure to subscribe in iTunes, favorite us in Stitcher, and while you're there, leave us a rating and review. It's a big help to us. It's a way for us to reach more people by improving our ranking. So I want to thank you in advance for doing that for us. Until next time, I'm Tony Federico, and on behalf of everyone at Paleo Magazine, thank you for listening.
If you would like to share your story on PMR, please visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/Paleo Magazine. For full transcripts of the show, as well as exclusive online content, go to our webpage, paleomagonline.com. You can also talk to us on Twitter at #PMRadio.